Street gang. Have a happy and healthy new year. We'll see you back here in 2007. I'll see you again at 2 o'clock on Street Signs. But now it's time for Morning Call. Happy New Year, Aaron. Good morning and welcome to Morning Call. I'm Michelle Caruso Cabrera. Mark Haynes and Liz Clayman have the day off. Shares of Apple rising today as the company tries to clear up its options mess. In a regulatory filing out this morning, Apple said that Steve Jobs was aware of stock options backdating and actually suggested some favorable dates. However, he did not benefit financially. On the news, shares of Apple are rising sharply higher by $3.73. That is a gain of 4 2/3% to $84.59 a share. Let's get down to Scott Wapner at the NASDAQ for more on Apple's financial report. Scott.
Yeah, Michelle, that clearly is what investors are hanging their hats on this morning, that Steve Jobs did in fact know about some of this backdating, but did not personally profit from it. Because remember, a lot of those grants, or all of those grants, were later rescinded. So if we go to the wall, we'll see right at the highs of the session now, I should say as well, Apple is up by 4.7%. Remember, yesterday we were just talking about Apple and the prospects of it closing below $80 for the first time since way back in November 6th. Now comfortably above that at $84.63 a share. The company's board also saying today in that filing that it does have complete confidence in Mr. Jobs as the CEO, and that is really easing many of the concerns on Wall Street, because if you will look at this 1 month chart that I have on here on the wall, you will see the slide that these shares have taken since really this came to light. Remember, it was back in October where this really started to heat up for Apple. There was a sell-off in shares, but clearly that sell-off is reversing today. Interestingly enough, remember yesterday we were talking about this big Financial Times report talking about those documents saying that a board meeting had taken place to approve the grants and alleging that they were falsified. Apple does address that as well in the filing. Let's throw up the quote here because it is rather interesting, and this was a pretty interesting report yesterday. It says, and we're quoting here, "The approval for the grant was improperly recorded as occurring during a special board meeting on October 19th of 2001. Such a special board meeting did not occur." However, the filing does go on to say there was no evidence that any current member of management was aware of this irregularity. Again, appearing to clear Steve Jobs of knowledge of that situation. However, that probe does raise what it says are, quote, serious questions with the accounting practices of 2 former officers. It didn't name them. However, much of the speculation, as you know, because we've talked about it so often, focuses on Fred Anderson, the former finance chief, and Nancy Heinen, the former general counsel of Apple. As you look at that year-to-date chart, it has been a pretty good year for Apple shares, up about 15%. And let me just also mention that Apple will, Michelle, take an $84 million charge as a result of the mishandling of these options. One more check, now up 5%, clearly at the highs of the session. Investors certainly, Michelle, liking what they found out today.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see that in the shares. Thank you, Scott. Another company once led by Steve Jobs, now embroiled in a stock options probe as well. Pixar, which is now owned by Disney, is under investigation by the SEC concerning its stock options. That's according to the Financial Times once again. Disney has launched an internal probe into the matter, but has played down the financial impact from the issue. Disney is, of course, a Dow component. The stock is higher by 4 cents today, $34.56 a share. The New York Stock Exchange has announced that it will join the NASDAQ and close on Tuesday for President Ford's funeral. We'll keep you up to date on any more that we know about that. In the meantime, stocks have been hanging around the flat line on their final day of trading for 2006. Let's show you how the major averages are moving right now. We showed you how shares of Disney were higher by about 4 cents. Most of the Dow components really hovering around the flat line. The Dow Jones Industrial Average higher by about 17 points, 12,518 on this final day of trading for 2006. Let's move on to the NASDAQ. And that's getting helped out by the big gain in Apple there, which is higher by nearly 11 points. That is a gain of about 0.5%, so more decisive than the Dow Jones Industrial Average, 2,436 for the NASDAQ. The S&P 500 is higher by 1.6, 1426 for the S&P. Let's show you what's going on with light sweet crude. The continued warm weather once again hitting the price of light sweet crude, which is down another 28 cents, $60.25 per barrel, was reapproaching 60 earlier on in the earlier electronic trading session. Bob Pisani is walking around on the floor of the NYSE, checking out today's action. Bob.
You know, Michelle, talk about a nice New Year's present. Biggest cheer I've heard all month went up, about 9:20 Eastern time when they announced that the New York Stock Exchange would be closed on Tuesday in observance of President Ford's funeral. This is a very touchy issue down here. Number one, the exchanges do not like to be closed 4 days in a row. That's a long-standing precedent. And more importantly, it's the first trading day of the year. And they were concerned that there would be objections, and there probably were from a number of people, that it was important for them to stay open. But the bottom line is precedent and respect for President Ford won out both at the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. A lot of happy faces down here for that. Let's talk about the end of the year, because the Dow is set to close at a historic high if we stay in this territory right now. Take a look at the year, and you've heard earlier we were talking about the best year since 2003 for all of the major indices. The Dow up 16% on the year so far, the S&P up 14%, the NASDAQ, and take a look at the Russell. We're also talking about the best year for all four of them since 2003. And of course, some historic highs there as well for the Russell and the Dow earlier in the year. Take a look at some of the biggest Dow gainers. In fact, here's the top 5 Dow gainers. You know, for all the problems that the automotive industry has had, General Motors is definitely the comeback stock of the year. By the way, Ford down still about 2% on the year, but GM's number one, up 57%. AT&T sitting right near a new high as well. Hewlett, Disney, and Exxon. Exxon, the best year in decades, and we're still trying to determine exactly how long it's been since Exxon was up 38%, but it's been decades, I can assure you of that. Let's take a look at the biggest Dow decliners. There are only 3 Dow stocks that are down this year. This is a very unusual situation. Only 3. That's Intel, the biggest decliner, down 18%. Home Depot down 2%. Walmart down 2%. And Alcoa and 3M all up only about 1%. Finally, just take a quick look at AT&T. I mentioned they're up about 45% on the year, sitting right near a new 52-week high. They're trying to close this deal with Bell South. Specifically, they're trying to win FCC approval for that acquisition of Bell South. They have made some concessions recently now, including the agreement for them to be net neutral. That is, they would not discriminate against any kind of internet traffic, and hopefully that will be enough to close the deal with the FCC. Remember, this is the largest telecom merger in U.S. history. Michelle, back to you.
Got it, Bob. As we head into 2007, what should investors be looking